So today we're going to be starting chapter 9. Chapter 9 is on inequalities. And today we're going to do some notes on introduction to inequalities. So if you want to get out your composition book and turn to your table of contents, I'm going to add in my table of contents and then we're going to start our notes. So I'm going to write down chapter 9, inequalities, on my table of contents. And today we're going to be doing an intro to inequalities. And then I'm going to turn to my page to start to do the notes. So this is going to be intro to inequalities. Okay, so I'm going to be first talking about the different symbols and how to read them. So this symbol here is read greater than. And this symbol here is read less than. And if we have this symbol with a little line underneath it, this is saying that it's also equal to. So now this is going to be greater than or equal to. And we have this symbol, which is going to be less than and equal to. Or equal to. Now, when we are talking about these symbols, it's important that we understand also how to graph this on the number line. So if you have a situation where you have x is greater than some number, what's going to happen is on your number line, you're going to have that number and you're going to have an open circle because we're not going to be including that number. And if it's greater than, it means we want everything bigger, and that's going to be to the right. Now, if we have a situation where we have x is less than a number, then again, if we have our number line, we're going to have our number. And we're going to have an open circle because we're not going to be equal to that number, but this time it's less than, and less than means it's going to be to the left, numbers in front of, smaller than. Now these two are going to be like this, but what's going to change is instead of it being an open circle, it's going to be a closed circle. So if I have x is greater than or equal to a number, then what's going to happen is I'm going to have a closed circle because now that number is going to be included, it's equal to it. And then I want everything greater, which is going to be to the right. And if we have x is less than or equal to some number, again, we'll have our number on our number line. And it is again going to be a closed circle because of the equal. And then I want things less than, which means smaller than or to the left. So it's important that you understand how to read these symbols and how to graph them on a number line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through some problems that actually were from our Chapter 9 packet, and I'm going to have us graph them on our paper. So for each inequality, graph it on a number line. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of these. So I'm going to maybe do 3 across each of these. So my first one, A, is going to be x is greater than or equal to -2. For B, I'm going to have -1, and the way we're going to read this is less than or equal to x less than or equal to 4. And C is going to be x equal 3. So let's start with these 3 first. So for this one, I'm going to draw my number line. And this point here is kind of our boundary point. It's where our graph is going to be kind of centered around. So I'm going to have -2 on my graph. And because it has an equal underneath it, that means this is going to be a closed circle. And I want numbers that are greater than -2, which means bigger than -2. So I'm going to be going this direction. So I'm going to have a closed circle. And I'm going to be shading this direction. Now, on one like B, this is actually 2 inequalities put together. So this is really saying that they want everything that is going to be greater than -1 or equal to, and less than or equal to 4. So the way I like to think about this is I basically want all values that are in between -1 and 4, including -1 and including 4. So since I said including -1 and including 4, I'm going to have closed circles at -1 and at 4. And then again, I want everything that is in between them. So I'm going to be shading like that. And again, this is red, -1, less than or equal to x, less than or equal to 4. Let me just write that out. -1, less than or equal to x, less than or equal to 4. That's how you would read it. So again, -1, less than or equal to x, less than or equal to 4. And basically I want everything in between -1 and 4, including -1 and 4. Now the next one, x equals 3, is actually an equation. And if I was asked to graph this solution on a number line, I would have 3, and I would just have a closed dot because I am including 3. So it's just going to be a closed dot, and that would be your graph. So now let's try D, E, and F. So D is x is less than -3. E is x is greater than 25. F is x is less than or equal to 1, or x is greater than or equal to 5. So let's start off with letter D. So I'm going to get my number line, have -3, and because this is less than without the equal, I'm going to have an open circle at -3. And then if it's x is less than, I want things smaller. So to the left are going to be the numbers that are smaller. On E, x is greater than 25. So I want all numbers that are greater than 25. So again, I'm going to have an open circle because I'm not including 25. And then I want everything bigger, so I'll be going 26, 27, 28, 29, and so on. I'll be going to the right. Now, F is two separate inequalities with the word or. So I'm going to have two little graphs on the same graph. I'm going to be graphing x is less than or equal to 1. And then I'm going to have a separate graph on that same number line, x is greater than or equal to 5. Just a little note, this one up here is an and, where this one down here is an or. Okay, so this one wants things that are x's that are bigger than -1 and smaller than 4. Here, we have a situation where we want x is smaller than 1 or equal to 1, or they could also be greater than or equal to 5. So for this one, I'm going to have 1 and 5. And always make sure you're putting them in the right order, smallest to largest. And this part right here, x is less than or equal to 1, I'm going to have a closed circle at 1, and then I want my x's smaller, so going this direction, my x's would be bigger. This direction, my x's would be smaller, so I begin 0, -1, -2, and so forth. And that would be this piece right here. Now for the second piece, x is greater than or equal to 5. Again, I'm going to have a closed dot here because it's including 5. And now I want numbers bigger than 5. So this would be smaller, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I want ones bigger, greater. So 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. And that would be my graph. So again, for an OR, you're going to have two separate pieces of graph. You graph the one inequality, and then you graph the other inequality. Okay, so now let's do our last three of these. So G is -5 less than x less than or equal to 0. H, absolute value of x is greater or equal to greater than or equal to 2. And I, absolute value of x is less than or equal to 2. Okay, so for this one here, again, this one is like letter B. It is actually an and I want things that are going to satisfy both situations. So again, this is read -5 less than x less than or equal to 0. So let me get -5 and 0, and -5 should be to the left of 0 because it's smaller. So -5 and 0. So again, I want my number to be bigger than -5, but not equal to -5. But it also has to be smaller than or less than 0 or equal to 0. So I'm going to have an open circle at -5 because of the less than. And because of the less than or equal to over here, I'm going to have a solid. And again, when we have something written in this form, I'm going to be wanting what's in between. And that would be our graph. Now, H and I are ones that I'll help us with today, but we're going to see more ones like this later on. So this is just a little intro. So for this, I want numbers that the absolute value of them is greater than or equal to 2. So I definitely know that 2 would be equal to 2. So the absolute value of 2 would be equal to 2. And absolute value of 3 would be greater than or equal to 2, and 4 and 5. So I'm going to have a closed circle here, and I'm going to be going this direction. But remember, when I take the absolute value of any number, I get a positive. So if I put in a -2, the absolute value of a -2 is 2. And if I put in a -3, the absolute value of a -3 is 3, and 3 is greater than or equal to -2. So I'm actually going to have 2 pieces of graph. I'm going to have a closed dot here, and it's going to go to the left because -3 and -4 and -5. And just a little note, this really could be written as x is less than or equal to -2. And if you have 2 separate pieces of graph, you want to use the word or. X is greater than or equal to 2. So when I'm doing this one over here, they look very close to the same thing, but here I want the numbers that are going to make this true, where I want numbers that are equal to 2 when I take the absolute value of them, or bigger than 2. Over here, I want numbers that are equal to 2 or less than 2. So again, I know I'm going to have a -2 and a 2. So let me put closed dots at -2 and 2. But this time I want things that are going to be smaller than 2. So the absolute value of 1 would be smaller than 2. The absolute value of 0 would be smaller than 2. The absolute value of a -1 would be 1. So that's also smaller than 2. So in this case, I'm actually going to shade in between. And the way I would write this I could write in this type of a form, or like this one up here, letter B. So the way I like to write these is I always start with my smallest number, which in this case is -2. And if I start with the smallest number, these are always going to be less thans or less than or equal to, and they should always be pointing the same when I'm doing one of these in between types. So this is going to be less than or equal to x, less than or equal to 2. So that's another way of saying this. And this is another way of saying this. So now I'm going to turn the page, and instead of going from the inequality to the graph, we're going to start with the graph and try to come up with the inequality, kind of like I did here on letter H and letter I after the fact. So again, for this, what we're going to do is we're going to write the inequality for each graph. Now, I'm going to do a screen share with you guys, and there will be 4 graphs that we are going to be doing. So these 4 graphs, if you want to copy them down, you don't need to copy down all of these numbers. Just copy down basically the number line, the point where the graph is starting, write that number, and then shade the direction. So you copy those down, and I'm going to copy them down on my paper. Okay, so this is what I copied down onto my paper. So if you haven't gotten them down, make sure you get them down now. So here, again, this one, I was starting at 1, had a closed dot shading this direction. On B, -1, open circle, shading this direction. On C, -3, open circle, shading this direction, and 2, closed circle, shading this direction. And then D, open circle at -4, closed circle at 2, shading in between. So I'm gonna stop and let you guys write the inequalities for this. And afterwards, we'll check your answers. So for this, this first one, we have a closed circle at 1. So 1 is included, and then we're shading to the right. So we want things that are greater than or bigger than 1. So this one should have been X is greater than or equal to 1. On letter B, we had a open circle at -1, and then we're shading everything smaller or less than to the left of -1. So that's going to be X is less than -1. Now on C, we have 2 different pieces on the same graph. So I'm going to define one, and then I'm going to use the word or in between. I'm going to define the second one. So this one here, this is going to be X is less than -3, or, and you need the word or here, this one's going to be X is greater than or equal to 2. And that's your answer. Now on one like D, what we're going to do is one like this, it's one where you've got the in between. So I'm going to start with my left side, my smaller number, -4, and then it's going to be less thans or less than or equal to. And in this case, since this is an open circle, it's going to be less than X, less than or equal to 2. So that's the end of our notes